Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the question of what exactly does that tree represent that we saw at the end of the fantastic finale of Loki Season 2? Is it the 616 universe and all its many branches, or is it the entire multiverse? I mean, the very fact that we're discussing it means that Marvel didn't make it 100% clear what it represents, but I do think there are a lot of hints and clues throughout both seasons that give us the answer. So keep in mind there will be tons of spoilers for both Loki Season 1 and Season 2, so make sure you've seen them all, but assuming you have, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. And don't forget, we do have the November contest running. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment. One random winner will be announced in early December and can choose between one of the books or steel books above. Best of luck. And also don't forget, we have the new membership option in case you want to help me in my goal of being full-time at doing this. You can see you get many perks for joining, but I also want to say no matter how you help the channel out, whether it's just simply by subscribing, leaving comments, and liking videos, I greatly appreciate everyone. Okay, so let's dive into this. What happens at the end of Season 1? Well, Loki definitely makes the sacrifice play, right? First, he destroys the loom, which lets all the branches now be completely free and on their own. However, we quickly discover that they're dying. As he looks out at them, he sees that they're not animated. They're dead. In fact, he tries to reanimate them, and it doesn't stick. So what's happening here? Well, basically the loom was artificially keeping those branches alive. It was a construct by He Who Remains, and when that construct was destroyed, it's almost like repotting a plant, right? You pull a plant out of the dirt, it's going to die. So OB says that, right? The branches are dying. So Loki realizes the only way to give them life is for him to energize them. He's going to have to be the new dirt, if you will. So he gives a look back, this look of, guys, you may never see me again. Or it may be a long time. And Sylvie realizes he's giving us a chance, which is so sweet. Then Loki, comfy shoes and all, heads up the steps, opens a portal, and he's gone. And then we see where he arrives is in front of what will now be the throne that he sought for all this time, right? And he screams as he grabs all the branches, pulls them forward to the throne, and eventually takes his seat, and sure enough, realizes I have to become the life for these branches. He sticks them in, and he now fuels them and he's the new dirt, if you will. And he forms them, and they become this tree. So at a minimum, this tree is the 616 universe and all the branches, right? But what else is it? Well, one thing I want to stress, it may look like Yggdrasil, but I didn't mean in previous videos to make it sound like this is Yggdrasil, because obviously Yggdrasil is just the 9 realms. It's the way that Asgardians viewed those 9 realms, and I think that's why Loki chose this imagery. But what really is it? Is it just 616 and its branches, or is it the entire multiverse? All right, let's start taking this one point at a time. Point number 1, the Loki series dealt with the 616 universe. I mean, that's very clear. Season 1, Episode 1, right? From the very beginning, while they're watching the video of Loki's life, that video is labeled 616. And I'm sorry if those folks, that think it should be 1999.99. I'm really not trying to get into that debate here. I'm just using, obviously, what they say in the episodes. So 616 is the sacred timeline. Then we see that any of the segments that start to form off of the sacred timeline, those are labeled 616 dot, blah, blah, blah. So notice when they prune Loki, it's on May 4th of 2012, right after the Avengers, when he vanishes away, and they list it as a timeline segment 616. We see this timeline segment labeled 616 when they go back to 1549. And we see it again when they go to 1905. So repeatedly, we're given this same numbering. 616 is the sacred timeline, and the segments are 616 segments. And I think an important thing to note, before it hits the red line, I think that's why they're calling them segments, because basically at that point, all you need to do is grab the variant, prune them, and then reset the area that was impacted by the variant, but you don't actually have a full-fledged timeline yet. But we do see, when Dox goes to bomb them all, right, in Season 2, that once they become timelines, so once they've passed the red line, they're still labeling them 616. That's important. They're calling them branches. So they're 616 branches. And even when they prune them, they're still calling the pruned timeline a branch, or it was before it was pruned. So that's really important. And of course, we saw repeatedly, there's the sacred timeline, so they're telling us when they're on that versus when they're on a branch timeline. But it's worth taking a pause right now and asking ourselves, is this a timeline or is this a universe? I mean, the frustrating thing is they throw these terms around loosely. Timeline, universe, multiverse, realm, dimension, reality, arg. It's painful. So What we really need to do is look at conceptually, forget the wording, conceptually, what is this? Well, Sylvie is clearly in a universe, right? She could go anywhere in this universe. It is a universe separate from the sacred timeline, which is the 616 universe. So they may call it a timeline, but conceptually, it's a universe. And so I really want to say thank you to both Admiral on the Discord server and Trexanus, who sent me an awesome Reddit post that I will leave in a pinned comment if you want to go check it out. They both made the point of we can't get hung up on the terminology. We need to think about the concepts and not so much focus on the wording Marvel is using. Okay, so Trexanus gave some really good ways to look at these terms. What essentially is a universe / reality? It's a 4-dimensional place consisting of 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. Really simple, right? It's the universe. Versus what actually is a timeline? A timeline is a chronological arrangement of events in the order of their occurrence. It's really that simple. So Marvel may flip back and forth between calling things a universe and a timeline, but that's the bottom line. These are the concepts. So then what about a branched universe / reality? What is that? Well, it's a universe or reality that is anchored to another universe reality at the point of divergence. Really simple, right? But the point is, Marvel was calling them branched timelines. Okay, that's fine, but conceptually, they are branched universes. So therefore, you could argue, at least at this point, we're going to have one more definition coming up, but the multiverse is a collection of multiple universes, and in this case, branched universes. So really, you have a multiverse with 616. It's its own multiverse because it has branched universes. That is a multiverse. That is really important to keep in mind because this line was very confusing at first, but we have to put it in perspective of the concepts. So remember in season 2, when the loom was exploding, Timely says the loom will never be able to accommodate for an infinitely growing multiverse. You can't scale for infinite. Yeah, Loki's face was my face when he said that because I'm like, wait, why are you calling it a multiverse? It's not a multiverse. It's just a sacred timeline. Well, keep in mind, even back in Doctor Strange 1, the Ancient One said, this universe is only one of an infinite number, worlds without end, some benevolent and life-giving, others filled with malice and hunger, dark places where powers older than time lie ravenous and waiting. Who are you in this vast multiverse? Mr. Strange. Notice she's calling it a multiverse. But Doctor Strange 1 took place while the loom was fully in place and pruning was going on, and all we had was the sacred timeline and its branched universes. Yet she called it a multiverse. So I think that's the same reason that Victor Timely is calling it a multiverse. In his mind, it is a multiverse because it is, right? You have multiple universes. They just happen to all be branched. So we can't let Timely's usage of multiverse there, guide us in our thinking. We have to look at the concepts being laid out. So I think it's also important to note, even after the tree has been formed, Mobius and B15, while they're looking at different variants, you have to look real closely at what they're saying. I got these reports on the variants of He Who Remains. Do any of them know we're out there yet? Nope. I guess one of them caused a little bit of ruckus on 616 adjacent realm. It's fascinating that they're still focused on 616 and looking then at adjacent realms. So to me, that's saying their focus is 616. That's their base. That is where their whole mind is thinking. That's important. And then I've heard some people ask, well, why are they calling the quantum realm an adjacent realm when it's really the basement of the universe, supposedly, according to Jeff Loveness? Well, keep in mind, how else would you describe it? I mean, it's technically adjacent to every universe. So again, you got to look at the high-level concepts and what's being said. But it is important that they're focusing on 616. And then they say, they handled it for now, but we're good for now. So my summary of this point is simply the Loki Season 1 and Season 2 were dealing with the 616 universe and its branched universes, which thus is the 616 multiverse. Okay, now, this is so important. Whether a universe is anchored or branched off another one is really key. So Michael Waldron has a quote, which I know it's not canon, but again, this is the guy that wrote Loki and Multiverse of Madness, so this is about as close to canon as you can get, and we'll look and see whether these principles make sense. He says it's impossible, or nearly impossible, to travel from one universe to another. In Loki, you can kind of hop between one timeline branch to another. which again are universes in reality. We know that. But anyway, in Loki, you can kind of hop between one timeline branch to another, but you got to be anchored to some original timeline. What America can do is she can jump from one universe to another. She can literally do the impossible. So, Waldron's quote aside, it is true. We saw America do something that nobody else could do. She jumped from like 616, for example, to 838. That's a big jump. That's something major. All we had seen people do is jump between branched timelines or branched universes. In particular, Scott, in his book, the Ant-Man book, or the Look Out for the Little Guy book, rather, I love this. There's actually good lore in this book. Some people said, I don't want to read it. Read it. It's good. It's really interesting. But one of the things he says is, the idea was we would identify specific recent points on alternate timelines where we knew an infinity stone could be, and then we'd use the quantum tunnel to jump to that timeline and grab the stone there. So he's explaining that the time heist was jumping between anchored timelines. So some people have said, oh, well, the time heist was jumping between universes. It was, but it's anchored universes. They were branches off the main universe. What America can do is jump to separate universes. We also saw in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which, whether or not you think it's still, canon to the main sacred timeline, it doesn't really matter. This concept is key, though. He says you went back in time, and then you branched off, but we can travel through something called the quantum realm. We can go between timelines. But again, these are branched timelines. He even said it, branched. So it's really important to understand, America Chavez, her power has no value if she can't do something other people can't. Now, I do think, by the way, Kangs are going to end up through tech being able to jump to different universes, but they're using tech. She can do it with her own powers. And even in things like No Way Home, sure, we saw the villains come from another universe, but what did it almost result? Well, it almost resulted in the destruction of both. So the key is America can do something without causing problems, without causing disruptions, and she can do it on her own. Okay, so then we need to add another concept in here. We need to add alternate universe, which is different than a branched universe, right? Because a branched universe means there is a point of divergence off of one universe and you're now anchored to the original one. An alternate universe has its own origin point, which we're going to get to in a second, but it has its own origin point and its own Big Bang. It is something completely separate. It is not branched. However we want to use these terms, the key is there is a conceptual difference between a branched universe and an alternate universe. So now that means we also need to expand the definition of multiverse. A multiverse, sure, it's multiple branched universes, or it could be a collection of multiple alternate universes. I wish, Marvel didn't keep using these terms interchangeably, but that's the fact. A multiverse from a conceptual standpoint is just more than one universe. Okay, so keeping these things in mind, let's look at how they describe alternate universes. Well, first of all, He Who Remains says they are stacked on top of each other. He says, eons ago, before the TVA, a variant of myself lived on Earth in the 31st century. He was a scientist, and he discovered that there were universes stacked on top of his own. Now, obviously, He Who Remains understands branching, and he didn't say that these are branched universes. He said they are universes stacked on top. So he's using a different way to describe it. I think that's really important, and that's really what Waldron was saying. Waldron is saying jumping between these universes is something that only America can do, but I do believe somehow, they just never told us how, isn't it interesting? Somehow the Kangs were able to meet with each other. And I think we are going to find that the Kang tech allows them to either go to some neutral point at the end of time or something. Anyway, they haven't unpacked that fully. We'll have to wait and see. But the key is they're stacked on top of each other. And I love the fact that Quantum Mania tells us the same thing. When Kang makes the circle of one universe, talking about I saw their chaos, notice he makes this image where they are stacked on top of each other, spreading across realities, their chaos. So we'll talk more about this scene in a moment, but the thing I want you to see here is this stacked imagery looks exactly like what we saw in Loki. These are alternate universes that are not connected to each other via branches. They did not diverge from each other through a nexus event. Okay, what else is important to learn? Alternate universes have a unique origin point. Now, while Mysterio was full of it, he was a huckster, Peter Parker, nonetheless, understands how a multiverse could work. So his dialogue is really important. He says, sorry, you're saying there is a multiverse? I thought that was theoretical. That changes how we understand the initial singularity. That's important because he was talking about only one origin for the universe. He's saying now we're talking about an eternal inflation system, which if you look up what that is scientifically, it's basically describing multiple origin points, multiple big bangs for multiple universes. And that's, again, what I think Kang was describing. That's what, in the quantum realm, that's what He Who Remains was describing. So these are separate universes with different origin points. And we saw that in Loki Season 1, Episode 6, right? They showed us these two black holes, and when we entered the one on the right, we then saw, the cosmos, outer space, we saw the planets. As we got closer, we saw the timelines, and as we spun around, there we were looking at the sacred timeline. But the key is there were two black holes, meaning the other universe had a separate origin point, and it had its own timelines, etc. So repeatedly, they're giving us this impression that there are two ways that universes are out there. They're either branched off one another by a nexus event, or they are alternate universes that are completely separate and have a different origin point. And this is really important because alternate universes can have different physics. The only way we get some of the craziness is if each of these universes have their own sets of infinity stones that define reality differently. And that's how we get the paint and the noir and the cube and the animated and the live action universes. They have to have different origin points so that the stones can form differently and give us different realities. And then from there, you get the branching for each of those universes. You get additional universes, but they're all anchored off of the original one. So, for example, Cube and Animated, I'm going to get rid of you for a second. That's why I think 838 and 616 have different origin points. They're not connected. And that's why America Chavez can jump between them. So the Avengers jump between anchored timelines during the time heist. That's what Fitz was describing in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., etc. But America Chavez can jump in between these universes. There has to be a difference, or again, her powers just have no point at all. Okay, so alternate universes can have different physics and they have the different origin points. Also, it's important to realize that alternate universes crossing boundaries is very, very bad. As Reed said, an incursion occurs when the boundary between two universes erodes and they collide, destroying one or both entirely. Now, we've seen many ways that these universes' boundaries can erode. Dream walking we saw when Doctor Strange went to 838, he was a threat to that universe. We've seen in No Way Home, when the villains were pulled into 616, that was the threat to our universe, etc. So certainly going to another universe can cause it. But he's talking in general here about just the boundaries eroding. Well, if we look closely at what Kang was showing us in Quantum Mania, that's what he's saying. He was saying that because the other Kangs were playing with time, like children, that their chaos started to spread across realities, and then watch, as he's saying, the universes are colliding. They're colliding and creating incursions because those branches between the two stacked universes that should have been separate keep growing and growing and growing because they're messing around with time until finally you get incursions. And he says that's why the multiverse was dying. So I think it's really key that alternate universes crossing boundaries just over time can cause this problem. And that's one of the biggest reasons I don't think the tree could have multiple universes in it, because if Loki had pulled in, different universes, 838 versus 616, he could literally create incursions in his own tree. So keep that in mind. And then this is really key. Kate Herron, who of course directed the first season, described it really well when she says that He Who Remains isolated the timeline, but now, because of what Sylvie's done, killing him, it's almost like it's going to branch, and then those branches will be like bridges to other timelines where these other versions of He Who Remains will be. So the He Who Remains were out there, and now these branches from the sacred timeline are going to start interweaving with the ones from the other universes. So she's describing that perfectly. And then again, so in two different times, it wasn't just once. She did a second interview where she said there's these branches, right, which is like the alternate reality. But when something, you'll see it, it's very subtle, but at the very last shot, when you see the multiverse, there's like basically other bigger physical timelines branching. So it's almost like these separate trees that are now connecting. So she's basically saying the two universes start to connect because of all of this craziness, and they overlap, and obviously that's an issue. It's almost like a bridge, she says. If you imagine a bridge, it's like another reality, but if the branch extends beyond a certain point, then it will connect to other physical timelines. That last shot we did, there were a lot of thicker branches. That meant to be like our timeline, and then there were other timelines like that, and those branches are connectors, basically. So it just would not make sense for Loki to have the entire multiverse, or otherwise he's running the risk of literally creating these incursions in his own branches. So this is what's really critical to understand. He Who Remains did not kill off the multiverse. Instead, he hid from it. So he says, I ended, and notice he stresses then, I ended the multiversal war. I almost think he's being defensive because he didn't really end it. Instead, what he did is he isolated the timeline, and then he managed that flow of time to prevent any new Kangs. But he's saying, you kill me, and the sacred timeline is now exposed, and you get multiversal war. Exposed to what? Exposed to all the other Kangs that are still out there. He didn't kill them. He basically hid from them. And again, Kate Herron says this so well. She says, he Who Remains, tells them in his story that he managed to close himself off and isolate the timeline that we know from the other timelines. It's almost like they're on an island that's completely hidden from everyone. So she's literally just answering it right there, I think, when she's saying, He Who Remains hid. He hid with the loom, protecting the sacred timeline from the other Kangs out there. So then Loki says, well, what are you afraid of? Me. He says, me. I'm afraid of me. All the other me's out there. Which is why Loki then finally realizes maybe it's true. Everything he was doing, the pruning, the preservation of the sacred timeline, it was about preventing more of him. But here's the real key. He Who Remains literally said, and as you may or may not know, my variants are already out there. Now keep in mind, the loom at this point is in bad shape. It's in bad shape, but it's still there. It's still protecting the sacred timeline because the loom is still functioning. Just it's about ready to blow up. Keep that in mind. Yet he's still saying, my variants are already out there. Now, if he meant they were inside the loom, if they were branches from the current sacred timeline, then they would be attacking right now. If they were trapped inside the loom with him, if he created new Kangs, they would be, no, he's referring to the ones outside the loom that are already out there. But hang on, because I'll really make this point clear in a second. See, I think he's talking about all of these guys, right? He's talking about the Citadel and all of them that we saw at the end of Quantum Mania. He then, Loki says, well, we'll find them. He says, there's too many. And Loki says, I won't stop. But He Remains says, look, the loom prevents a brutal war where nothing survives, Loki, not even the sacred timeline. Break the loom, and you cause a war that kills us all. Game over. Again, he's saying, break the loom, because the loom hasn't been broken yet. The loom is still there. The loom is still protecting them. And then here's the real key. He says the temporal loom is a failsafe. When the loom is overloaded with branches, it deletes the ones that aren't supposed to be there, except for the sacred timeline. And the TVA, that's just collateral damage. Look, no biggie. It's easy to rebuild. So put this in perspective. The loom has not been destroyed yet, because He Remains said so to Loki. And the loom, if Loki doesn't do something, is going to reset. It's going to reset back to the sacred timeline. So when He Who Remains is referring to his variants already being out there, he can't be talking about inside the loom, because that's going to reset. What would be the fear? Who cares if they're inside the loom? In fact, again, if they were inside the loom, they would be attacking right now. No, he's talking about the fact that outside of the loom, if you shut it off, then you're going to be exposed to the variants that are already out there. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments, but I think they're making it crystal clear that He Who Remains knows the other variants are out there because he just hid from them. And then I think this is really key in Quantum Mania. Cassie asks, what's coming? And Kang says, me, a lot of me. They exiled me down here. They're afraid of me. Who's he talking about? He's talking about these guys. He's talking about these guys. And the last point I'll make that I think really, really makes this clear is when they do start conversing about the situation, one of them says, so the exiled one is dead? Well, are you sure he's dead? If it wasn't true, I wouldn't call you. Must really eat you up that you're not the one who killed him. None of us killed him. They did. So here's the key. If these guys were recreated after the loom was destroyed, how would they have any memory of the exiled one? How would they have any memory of wanting to kill him? How would they have any memory of wanting revenge? if they were all brand new created. No, these guys are ticked off. I believe not at the Kang in Quantumania. I think they're ticked off at He Who Remains, because He Who Remains ran and hid from them. The Kang in Quantumania, they whooped his butt, right? If they wanted to kill him, they would have killed him. Instead, they just threw him into the quantum realm and said, you're out of here. They're mad at He Who Remains because He Who Remains beat them, weaponized Goliath, and then hid behind the loom. And now suddenly the loom is gone, and they're like, whoa, they killed him, and we should be worried. So that's why they're going to come after our heroes in the 616 universe and want not so much revenge. They're afraid. They're really worried because our heroes, Loki, Sylvie, etc., killed a Kang, killed He Who Remains. All right, last couple things. I really think the imagery that Loki created implies it's just a tree within a forest, a la the greater multiverse. I do not think he created the entire multiverse. Instead, he is holding the 616 and its many branches, which forms the tree within a bigger forest. And again, Kate Herron literally is saying that, right? Look at the last couple sentences she says. There's like basically other bigger physical timeline branches. So it's almost like these separate trees are now connecting. Those separate trees are those alternate universes, the ones that have their own Big Bang, like an 838, that are separate from ours. For what it's worth, I think that those are the Spider-Man universes as well. I think they're not part of the sacred timeline. They have their own timelines, because that's why when those universes collided with ours in No Way Home, that's why we almost had an incursion. If they were just branches off the sacred timeline, branched universes, we'd be fine. But instead, they were alternate universes separate from ours, and that's why those villains and heroes, Toby and Andrew, caused so many problems. So all of those are separate universes, separate trees. So again, she talks about the thicker branches being meant like our timeline, etc. They're just using this tree imagery all over the place, and this was even the first season. She was saying this back in 2021, and they were already talking about the different trees being separate. Lastly, oh my, what if? I think I finally have figured out what if. So hang with this for a second. So I think what if is talking about branched universes / timelines. Remember, they use these terms left and right. But anyway, branched universes off of 616. The Watcher says time, space, reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibility where a single choice can branch, and that's the key word, branch out into infinite realities, creating alternate worlds from the ones you know. I'm the Watcher. I'm your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if? So the most important word isn't whether he's using reality or universe or even multiverse. It's branch. He's calling them branches. And it is worth noting, I thought this was fascinating. So A.C. Bradley, who wrote What If, got on a podcast, so unfortunately I can't use her direct quotes. I can only because it's audio. But anyway, on the GOAT Movie podcast, and she revealed something very interesting. She said, when you're writing animation, you're writing so far into the future that you can't think 4 years down the line. So she mentions the Doctor Strange episode. I wrote that in February of 2019. And she thinks maybe she should have used Nexus Point rather than Absolute Point. I'm not sure. I kind of like Absolute Point. But more importantly, she says the Loki scripts weren't even written yet. So that animatic locked before Loki even finished their scripts, because you're always writing about 2 years ahead of animation. It's kind of intense and insane. My only point is, that's why I think perhaps some of the verbiage in What If is a little more confusing than maybe it should be, because A.C. Bradley had to literally write it before Loki was even done yet. It's just the way animation's constraints are. So just bringing that up because I think that's interesting. But now let's look at some of this verbiage and see if it fits with universes that are anchored to 616. Not alternate universes, but anchored universes, branched universes. So, but in one universe, a single choice creates a whole new hero, the Watcher says. That's the moment that created a new universe. So he's not saying new timeline, but he is saying branch. It's creating this branch. But in a multiverse, now we're using multiverse, right? A multiverse of infinite possibility is your destiny determined by your nature or the nature of your world. But remember, multiverse can refer to 616 and its branched universes. A multiverse is more than one universe. So it's a little weird that he uses multiverse, but it's no more weird than the Ancient One using it as well. Basically, he's using it the same way the Ancient One did. They're referring to 616 and its branched universes. Because the Watcher says, in this universe, Yondu outsourced the assignment to his subordinates. So they are universes, but they're branches. Then this is really interesting. If they're branched universes, it actually resolves one of the bigger problems with What If. Because remember, Infinity Ultron was able to use those stones everywhere. He says the entire multiverse at your fingertips, and you spent all your time up there. The boundaries of the multiverse are irrelevant to beings like you and me. But are they? Or is he just going between the branched universes? If they're just the branched universes, it actually makes sense why the stones work. Because remember, in the time heist, they were able to go back in time, create a branched universe, and take the stones from that universe and use them then in the main 616 universe. So the stones work within the same universe as long as there's branched universes off of it, or otherwise the time heist wouldn't have worked. The problem is the stones, it seems, don't work either when they're outside their universe, a la at the TVA, because the TVA was outside of time, it was outside of any universe, or when you take them to a different universe. So anyway, very interesting, but this might actually make this kind of odd plot line work. And then, of course, Doctor Strange says you aren't just our best hope to save one universe. You're the last hope to save all of them. And the Watcher says you're the guardians of the multiverse, which again in this context is 616 and its branched universes. And then this is kind of interesting. Now we throw timelines in. Because in the awesome Doctor Strange episode, I love it. But he says, the Eye of Agamotto, cradle of temporal singularity, discovered by Cagliostro, manipulation and alteration of timelines. So now we've had multiverse, universe, and timeline. Got them all, right? Bingo. So I drew upon the power of the dark dimension to split the timeline, to split you, and to allow two of your possible timelines to occur in one universe. Wild episode. I love it. It's a fantastic episode. But yeah, she's basically saying two timelines inside one universe. So there she really does mean timeline in that conceptual definition that I gave earlier. So, okay, I do think it all fits together, especially when you look at the timeline book, which I got to admit, that's what they're showing, right? They're showing branches off the sacred timeline. They're really making that clear. It is branched universes. So they are connected to the original 616 with the deviation points being, 695, 1943, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very interesting. And don't forget, Loki had to occur, the Loki series, before the What If could occur. So it kind of makes sense. Before the Loki series, they were pruning all the branches, so you wouldn't have much to look at. We had Watchers. We saw the Watchers in the Guardians, and we've seen them in I Am Groot. But there was much less to look at. There was still a multiverse, though. Keep in mind, there were more than one branch. So just interesting. Because remember also from the timeline book, I've mentioned this before, but they show that the Loki series, season 1 and, of course, season 2 follows right after it, occur back-to-back right before WandaVision and the rest of Phase 4. So let's summarize this one last time. Loki series dealt with 616 universe and its branches. Whether a universe is anchored to another is key. You're either anchored or you're separate. If you're separate, you're an alternate universe. The alternate universes are stacked on top of each other. They have a unique origin point. They therefore have different physics. They cross boundaries, and if they do, that causes an incursion, so that's very dangerous. He Who Remains didn't kill off the multiverse. The tree imagery implies a tree within a forest. And lastly, What If seems to be universes anchored to 616. So I think if you put all that together, you really get the answer. I think Marvel is trying to tell us that the tree is 616 and its branched universes, and that's it. I mean, Loki wouldn't want to risk creating incursions in the tree by pulling in different universes, and I don't think he even could. If they have a separate origin point, if they have unique physics, their paint, they're animated, etc., those are separate universes. So it just all makes sense if you put it all together, and that's why I think this diagram that I've been showing throughout some of the other videos works perfectly. So you had the different Kangs who then all met each other. Their universes were stacked on top of each other, which is what I'm kind of showing here. And as a result of the multiversal war, He Who Remains was like, I'm a head out, creates the loom, and protects himself. He basically says, I don't care what you all do, I'm going to be safe inside the loom. And for what it's worth, it seems like the others, those three main Kangs, have decided, to stop fighting each other and now have consolidated power. So they didn't really destroy the rest of the multiverse. Instead, they're just controlling it, managing it, killing off anybody they don't want, that they feel is a threat. Of course, then we learned in Loki season 2 that when they stopped pruning the branches, the loom couldn't handle it. So the question was, what do? Do they let the loom destroy, reset, and convert back to the sacred timeline and the few branches that are allowed to exist? Or do they shut the loom off and open to the multiverse? Well, that was their choice, and so Loki created the tree. That's why I think the tree represents, and now he's going to let things continue to branch, and sure enough, we're going to have problems. We're going to have those timelines slowly mingling across the different trees, and that's what I think leads to these guys coming for revenge. Not even revenge. Well, revenge, I guess you could call it revenge. They want revenge for He Who Remains being killed because they wanted to kill him, first of all, but they're also scared. Like, oh my goodness, what is going on in this 616 that we've had no access to for all this time? So, with that in mind, now we head to the rest of the multiverse. Obviously, the TVA is going to play a huge role. I think they're going to start heading out and trying to prevent any other Kangs, not just inside 616, but ultimately they're going to realize the threat is beyond that. It's to the greater multiverse as a whole. So there's the little tree image. I love that on their monitor. And of course, we have Loki managing, I believe, strongly just 616 and its branch timelines. So let me know what you think. I realize they did not make it 100% clear, but I think when you put all these facts together and you look again at the conceptual understanding, not the wording, not them throwing timeline and universe and multiverse around left and right, but if you look at what the concepts are behind it all, I think this really makes sense. Okay, and don't forget, we do have the November contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, and you might win one of the books or timeline books. And feel free to join the channel if you'd like to go above and beyond in supporting. But I thank all of you for everything you do. And also, love to have you join us on Discord. Notice here's metaphysics, and you need to join the Discord if for no other reason than to tell Titan. Notice his top comment there. Titan says metaphysics sucks. No, it doesn't, Titan. It doesn't. He's wrong, right? We love this stuff. No, you need to join, and you need to respond to Titan right there. But no, I will leave a pinned comment so you can join the Discord. It's so much fun. We have a lot of fun commenting on all these different things. And there's always somebody up because it's almost 1,000 members rather across the globe. All right, don't forget also, I'd love it if you subscribe, if you leave a comment, and you can also check out more content. And we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.